All right, recording has started, and this is the December 15th, 2022 Crossplane community meeting. I am traveling right now and on the road. I think my connection is fairly stable though, but if I do happen to cut out or anything like that, then we can have somebody else step in to continue driving. I will drop into the Zoom chat right now a direct link to the agenda document. And if folks want to add new topics or things they want to chat about today, the agenda is always open and people are more than welcome to add things to it. So let's go ahead and start off with the milestone checkup here. We will be diving into deeper details on some of these features and areas of focus for this milestone at later points in the agenda, but we'll get into the high level right now. All right, so a couple of quick updates, and actually let me see the participants list real quick too, which is just taking up more and more of my screen. So it's hard to see everybody here. Okay, sweet. So yeah, so I think let me see if there's like big notable updates. I think probably one of the biggest updates is that in terms of the observe only resources, Hassan has put out a design document for that, and we'll be walking through in more details. Hassan will take us through some of the high level areas of the design and some of the key changes there, and taking in some feedback as well. So we'll be able to go through that together a bit interactively today during this meeting. So that will be a good usage of our time. Nick has continued to work on the custom compositions effort as well. And so I know that there is some runnable code that is usable right now, and I think Nick is continuing to push on that and continue driving to an alpha release in 1.11 of this initial feature here. So I don't know. Oh, Nick, you're on the call. Actually, can you give us a quick update on where custom compositions are, and if there is ready for feedback from folks, or start taking it for a test spin or anything like that?
It's basically what you just said. Not really. Maybe early next year.
That sounds really far away until I realized it's basically holidays already. So yeah, next year is totally reasonable. All right, and thanks for continuing to drive that, Nick. I did want to ask about on 2099, if there is, so Yuri, I know you've done a couple of reviews on this one, support patching from common data sources. Is there anything that's still pending from the reviewer side, or is there some updates you're waiting for from Max, or what's the latest on this one? Because I really want to continue to push to get that into 1.11 as well.
Yeah, there were several rounds of review. I just managed to return to it after my PTO yesterday, and I think there are some issues with this PR after the rebase. So I'm waiting for the fixes from Max. But I didn't check it today. But yesterday it was like pipes are broken, and I also suggested that for this complex feature we want some examples to be around in documentation, so with which would demonstrate the outer idea how to use environment configs.
Got it. And do you think there's any sort of support that Max would need to continue pushing on, or like adding those examples, or like he's got everything that he needs to be able to execute on that, on incorporating that feedback?
Yeah, I have an example repo on my side, so like he actually can grab that repo and amend with his like additional samples, and that's it, and incorporate somewhere. It's actually a good question where to put that examples, because yeah, we have a place in like a docs embedded in a Crossplane, but I'm not sure if a core Crossplane repo has a good place for these kind of examples apart from the documentation. Just to clarify, so yeah, there are like a chunks of the patches for environment configs that are already there, and the part of these PRs that were edited after one of the review, but they do not provide enough context how to use the environment config in general. So like I made some attempt. It worked for one of the use cases, but another one I like totally missed the original outer intention, I guess. So So these kind of examples would help with the consumption of the feature long term for sure.
Okay, got it. And so it looks like your ask here, this is just from yesterday. So yeah, so that makes sense that Max hasn't followed up on this yet. But your ask here is fairly clear about what you want to see as we, obviously we need to get the pipelines, working again. But then adding the example, like this ask is fairly clear and Max has what he needs.
Yep.
Cool. All right.
I'll follow up with y'all on where we can put that in the documentation. I'm about to take on a bit of a reorg of some of the existing doc, and I think we can make sure we have a good home for that kind of thing.
Awesome, Pete. That sounds good to consider. All right. So those are some of the high profile things that are in process. We talked last time about the work that Ezgi had finished on maturing composition revisions to beta. Is there anything else to add on that, Ezgi, or that's, you got to put that into place and it was ready, and we talked about it last time. Nothing new to add on that one.
Yeah, the development has finished. The blog post is coming. It's on the way. So I think we are ready to go.
Awesome. That sounds good. Yeah, and then do reach out for me for anything you need with the blog post as well. I'm still standing by to help out with get that out.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then Jesse, is there anything that you wanted to add for the signature validation work that you had been working on? Any updates you want to share?
Hey, how you doing? I have to admit I haven't gotten enough time to actually put any code down, but I have been doing a bunch of research into the way that some of the more recent implementations of package managers have been doing cosign validation, and I've added a lot of notes in response to some of the one-pager comments that had gotten submitted. There's a couple of open questions that I have. I might actually seek some insight from yourself, Jared, or maybe Dan, to understand what a MVP might be, what MVP features might be appropriate given some of the comments. It does seem to me that it's actually pretty, there's not much more to adding keyless signing than the keyful signing that we have in the POC that I submitted with that one pager. So I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to take the time to actually do the keyless signing. It is going to be more valuable in the long run. And it was something that I kind of knew would be a next step, but given that the examples that I'm looking at inside of Flux, for instance, there's really not much more to adding the keyless signing. So it's kind of to me like a low-hanging fruit at this point. Maybe we should just go that route.
Nice, yeah, and I think Dan is going to be more of a domain expert in this, and so his opinion would be certainly useful, and do seek that out. But if you're with your research so far, you feel like you're classifying it as low-hanging fruit, then that definitely sounds like a nice addition to make the scenarios of coverage here more robust with what hopefully would be fairly minimal effort. That does sound like a nice trade-off.
Yeah, and I think that I can probably put together a revised proof of concept with keyless signing in the next couple of days. So I would imagine that maybe even by end of day tomorrow, before the weekend, that way we could have something to review before the holidays.
That sounds awesome, Jesse. Thank you very much for your update.
Yeah, and if this does slip out past 1.11, I think that's an understandable situation. I wouldn't want to hold up anyone on that release.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable too. It's good to get some updates on like what the focus area is, or if especially if you need help or feedback on things to help unblock you with this audience here. So that's that's totally reasonable if that happens. I think that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Jesse. Thank you, man. Okay, sweet. So I think that's the major stuff for 1.11. Does anybody else want to bring up 1.11 related milestone news, as we're kind of going to go a little bit dark, a fair amount of people here over into the year holiday time? and then come back at it strong to wrap up the release and get it out late January timeframe. Anything else that folks want to bring up for 1.11? All right, we'll keep moving on then. So there are some fresh provider releases from this week. There are direct links to all of the major ones that I was aware of, at least for the AWS, GCP, Azure ones. And then one thing I did want to bring up with this group is that there's a upbound official provider for the Terraform now, but I did want to see if it's possible to get like release notes into the repo as well, because it is a nice landing page for the provider and examples and documentation and all that sort of stuff, but the releases page is empty. So maybe Yuri, is that something that you could follow up on or speak to, so that there's like going forward, at least with releases, that we have release notes that kind of give details about what's in each release, and we have some of that there.
Yeah, definitely great point. We missed that. Yeah, I will add them. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Okay, that sounds good. Cool. And then I did want to call out a new provider. There's a Natska provider that got added and shipped as well too, or it's not a provider, it's a configuration that has a bunch of really good examples for configuration for multiple cloud provider agnostic multi-cloud examples of managed Kubernetes offerings. So there's a great example to use and follow along with to help you install and use cluster abstractions across multiple providers. So I wanted to call that one out as well. And any other providers that have been released recently, I just threw this together really quickly right before the meeting. Any other providers that folks want to call out that have recent releases are more than welcome to be added here as well too. Christopher, anything on your side, any releases of multiple providers that you work on that you want to call out here, man?
No, in the next days, there will be the provider AWS release from the community provider. We will work on this.
All right. Sounds good, man. All right. So that's providers and 1.11 features. I wanted to move into another section here where we wanted to give some transparency and some insight into what Upbound and engineers there are working on that is highly relevant to the community. Some of this will be supplemental to obviously what we have on the roadmap and the core Crossplane releases, et cetera. But I did want to give a space for any company that's working on things for Crossplane and in the Crossplane ecosystem to be able to share and get feedback and collaborate with that here as well. So this is certainly open to anybody else who wants to be adding their thoughts and updates and things that they've been working on as well. So Matthias and Jean, do you want to go ahead and start talking through some of these topics here?
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, I'll let Matthias go first on the official providers.
Yeah. So I think, that it was a little bit of like a discussion in Slack on this of like, what are our plans here, and what are we doing? And I think one of the to-dos is that we write this up, but happy to respond to any questions, concerns, or anything right now. The idea for official providers, if you've read the blog post, right, is that we are building these with a certain set of the technologies underneath with Upjet and the core generation of just making the core building blocks available to our customers, and just making sure that we have all the necessary processes in place that we can support this from an official point of view, from an enterprise support point of view. So this is what we've been doing with AWS, GCP, and Azure. And as you can see by folks, right, creating these new providers, there's always a constant thread of new providers. It's not too much of a news that we're building a new provider, Azure AD, right, just to close up the Azure folks. But from an API point of view, vendor point of view, this is this is it, right? This is we don't have immediate plans to build any kind of other official providers. Quite the contrary, right? This was always a goal of us, and again, like on the phrasing, we should be a little bit clearer. We want to make sure that there's like a healthy ecosystem of providers, right? Which is like the marketplace lists all kind of providers. It doesn't really judge there. We want to make sure that if people are happy with the community provider of AWS, they're happy to use it. It's more of like what we can do for our customers on these providers, and the same goes true for the Terraform provider, which we just made official. It's just like making sure that we have the processes and things in place that we're able to provide our customers. Now, making it official does, come with a certain level of guarantees of like what Upbound puts behind this, right? Of just making sure that it's maintained, it's supported, and that we have a certain level of internal processes that we're working with these. They're still Apache 2, right? They're still open source. If there's any feedback around this or for any problems or any issues, I'm more than welcome to listen to this. We're working with the respective maintainers of these providers, right? In this case, this was Bob and Yuri, right? Mainly around provider Terraform. And for others, this is provider Helm and Kubernetes, which are on our pipe. We'll do the same and make sure that folks that are working on the provider are happy with the path that we're taking. That's like the gist of it. But again, I think it's important that we have a blog post around this or somewhere specifying this. So this is on my radar, together with Jared or someone, of making sure that this is like a transparent process and transparent way of looking to this. Any thoughts, any questions?
Yeah, I can add something because I had, I don't know, 5 or 6 talks from the community directly pinging me and asking me, here, Christopher, did you know why Upbound moves the provider Terraform from the Crossplane contrib repositories to the Upbound? Because from the governance perspective, it's like missing communication in the community that Upbound will deprecate such providers and release official one. There was no communication in the past community meetings, or I missed it, but other folks also missed it, and it feels like from a governance perspective something changed for this provider, because the community can now only open issues, something like this, but the Upbound folks will take care if it's merged or if they have a completely other view on the things. And there was some big companies they're asking me what's going on there with this provider. That's why I'm added the thing in the announcement channels that we can talk about this in the community meeting. So
if you could you be a little bit more specific, like from a governance point of view, what has changed? So previously there were contributors to like the contributors haven't changed, right? It's only that we're additive of like having more Upbound employees on this, making sure that this is supported and the right bug fixes, etc., are in place, mainly for our customers, but benefiting the whole community. From a governance point of view, could you specify like what the issue is?
I had the feeling that some of the guys asking, for example, if they open merge requests, if Upbound will go forward with them, or looking for other merge requests first for their paid customers. This was something they asked. And from the other hand, it was more like from the communication perspective, that Upbound will directly, it feels like that Upbound directly deprecated the community provider and released the official ones without any communication in the community. The communication was, from the community perspective, this is the last release in the Terraform provider, and in the future, it's the official one.
Gotcha. So go ahead, Bob.
Well, no, I was just going to say this. You and I, Matthias, had a long discussion about exactly this. This is what my concern was all along, and nothing nothing from a technical perspective or a governance perspective. My concern was exactly this from an impression standpoint, right? The impression is that provider Terraform is being, absorbed by Upbound. And even though I'm still a maintainer and Yuri's still a maintainer, and from a functional perspective, from a process perspective, nothing has really changed. And I don't think there are any plans to change. It's the impression that matters to the community. And so, I mean, I know you and I talked, and I apologize, I can't remember exactly what you said, but I'll ask the question here like I asked the question before, so I can hear the answer again. From Upbound's perspective, I understand completely the need to have full control over something for their customers, for customer support, right? I mean, you need to have that level of control.
Right.
And then, on the Crossplane side, I think it's worked really well, and I can always say that from the outside, in terms of Upbound maintaining their own fork of Crossplane and supporting that for their customers. And I know you told me why that wasn't considered for the provider Terraform, as well, to just have an internal fork of provider Terraform for Upbound to support. But and again, from an impression of the community standpoint, that might have been a better way to go. But I'll let you.
No, sure. Yeah, and thanks for raising that. So again, apologies if the impression has changed. So that's definitely something we'll circle back on and make sure it's communicated well. And I'm not so thanks, Bob, for saying there's no technical or any governance problems there that you see. But again, if anyone, right, and Christopher, please send them along or anonymize those, right, those questions. If there's specific governance issues of saying, okay, this is effectively going in the wrong direction in the future, we want to address this, right? This is not about taking ownership of something that belongs to the community, but rather saying, okay, this is the one that is now supported by Upbound. And to your question, Bob, we can definitely, and we should, right, in the community discuss if a fork is something that is feasible. In the past, the discussions we were having, and I hope that I'm reflecting your and Yuri's thoughts. If don't, please disagree. A fork was an additional complexity that we thought would be more confusing than helpful. Because at that point you would have two provider Terraforms that effectively are doing the same thing. Everyone that is working on these two forks would be able to push releases, etc., on these two forks. So the assumption is that a forking would, from a governance point of view, might be a little bit more transparent of what the intention is, but from a practical point of view might be more confusing. Again, that is the assumption, and kind of I try to validate that on the provider Terraform side. If you folks think this is different, and we'll make sure that we do this with the next couple of providers, especially Kubernetes and Helm. If folks think this is the wrong direction, well, we'll definitely look into this and see if other options are available. Right. I just want to be very clear about this, right? These providers are still Apache 2 licensed, right? We don't intend to change anything of how these are governed. It's more of just being transparent about that these are by Upbound, and there's a major invest by Upbound, and for Upbound customers that they can rely on this. If the community has a pushback on this and saying, from a governance point of view, we don't really understand it, we hope to clarify this. And even if that clarification doesn't work, then yeah, we'll continue the discussion and see what other options we have.
And yeah, Matthias, thanks for talking through a lot of this and addressing the questions and concerns here. Two things that I would just want to add onto that, or reinforce onto it more so, is that one, this type of decision was and should continue to be, if it happens in the future, a maintainer team decision, right? It is not a Upbound exclusive decision. It is amongst the maintainer team for a particular repository or provider. If that maintainer team, which includes people outside of one particular vendor, then that team decides together if it's a move that they want to make to make it an up-out official provider. So yeah, the messaging or broadcasting or just getting that out more broadly, yeah, can probably be improved, and we'll be happy to take feedback on how to do that better in the future as well, should this happen. But that's one thing I would want to make clear, that it is a maintainer team decision for a given repository, and everyone has a say in that. The other thing I wanted to add on and reinforce as well is that going forward, it is an open source. Like there are maintainers outside of Upbound, there are contributions that are accepted from the broader community as well. So I don't think there should be any conscious priority or preference for one commit or one merge request over another. We certainly should be considering all of those in the spirit of the project. What is that project's focus and set of functionality, and then does a merge request jive with that? And if it does, then it should be accepted if it's at a quality level. So there shouldn't be, if anybody feels like they're not getting the attention they need on additions and contributions to it, that's certainly something we want to hear feedback on as well, because it's in the spirit of that project is still to be a community contribution to it, and people getting the things in there that the community wants to see. So that should still be what we experience.
Yeah, maybe to emphasize the fact for the group that the current set of maintainers is not exclusively Upbound. So I am from Upbound, Bob is from Nokia, so we already have a mixed group of maintainers, and this decision was done within this group, right? And I personally pushed for deprecating Crossplane Contrib 1 for the pure technical reason, to maintain absolutely identical providers in the two different places, have a different pipelines running, builds, and community issues. So just to consolidate at a single place. That was the main motivation.
Yeah, and Christopher, feel free to, if there is, other feedback that you're hearing, direct them.
It's fine for me. I wanted to bring it up from the community perspective because I had messages. That was my thing.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, and then,
people anonymize the things and can write with Matthias directly what are the concerns about, and I will update him.
Yep, cool. Yeah, and then if you can convey also that our doors are very open, that if people want to reach out directly to Matthias or myself, absolutely welcome that, and having we're more than happy to have a direct and open conversation there with anybody who ever wants to share their voice. Everyone's voice can certainly be heard around here.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I really appreciate the discussion here and helping drive the right transparency and information sharing with everybody. Cool. So then, Jean, did you want to then cover some of the areas that your team's going to be focusing on?
Yeah, sure. So we already touched on observe any resources and composition functions. So I'll just mention that our intention is to start looking at the pluggable external secret stores design proposal that was merged quite a while ago. We're interested in implementing this functionality, and Eski will be leading the implementation of that and putting up a PR in the near term. This is not something that will be done in time for 1.11, so we don't expect it to be near ready for that.
Awesome. That sounds like a very exciting feature as well. Cool. So yeah, a lot of really good things being worked on with your team there, and thanks for sharing some of that and making it well known for everybody. And then once again, folks are more than welcome to add to this section too for anything that your teams are working on. We can all share that together here in this section. All right, so yeah, quick time check. Yeah, let's keep on moving because I think we've got a couple of topics still left here. So we got a couple links to interesting content that folks have been creating and building amongst the community. So there are direct links for all of those articles and white papers or videos, etc. here. So feel free to click through to those and see all of those interesting bits of content. Hassan, let's go ahead and I'll let you drive to talk through the high-level summary of the observe-only resources, feature design, and some of the key aspects of the experience that you want to share with this group here and get some feedback on. So I'll stop sharing. So if you want to share your screen, you can drive that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, so let's get this. Yeah, so basically, as Jared mentioned, this is an open PR waiting for reviews, and I think it will be open for at least like a couple of days or for the next 2 weeks, I would say. So I will go through it quickly, like the proposal and the alternatives that we have discovered and or discussed in the document. So first, I would like to start with the background. So like people might already like aware of the need for like such an observe-only or read-only mode for Crossplane managed resources. And in this first background section, I try to like group them, the use cases and scenarios. I try to group them, and I would like to quickly go over them. So first group is basically like referencing existing resources without managing them. So assume you have your existing resources managed by some other tool or created by like ClickOps, and you just want to use that together with the Crossplane resources by referencing them. So a very good example of this is like you want to give a reference to an existing subnet from a Kubernetes cluster that you are creating with Crossplane. The other group is like other than referencing, you want to fetch some data, not the like I want to use this subnet, but it's more like I need the, let's say, CIDR range of this subnet, or I need the OIDC endpoint of this Kubernetes cluster. So this is another group, which is fetching data from existing resources. And another scenarios or use case that is actually I became more aware of like during the design write-up and getting some feedback or input from the community is actually like gradual migration of existing resources to Crossplane. So instead of just creating a managed resource for an existing resource, existing cloud resource, by importing it into Crossplane, you immediately start managing it with Crossplane. And it is there is a desire to first do this with a read-only mode or in observe-only mode, and then after some experiments or after some confidence level, you want to change something and start immediately managing that resource. So yeah, that's basically the most common scenarios that you would like to resolve in this proposal. And the proposal is actually introducing a new spec named management policy to to all managed resources, and it will have current, like in the beginning, it will have 3 different policy options, which is full control, which is default one, and it will behave as like how Crossplane is behaving with deletion policy delete. And the other one is similar to deletion policy orphan we have today. And for this one, we are proposing to have a policy named observe create update. And if this is set, then we will not delete the external resource, rather orphan it when the managed resource is deleted from Kubernetes. And the last one is actually the observe only policy. And in this mode, Crossplane will only observe the external resource and will not make any changes or deletions or updates or whatever on the remote. So this is just a read-only mode that we are actually introducing with this proposal. So related to this, since management policy and deletion policy will have some very close relationship, and they are actually controlling the same behavior, which is how the external resource should be controlled, or how should Crossplane behave to the external resource when something happens in the custom resource inside Kubernetes cluster. So another proposal here is to deprecate deletion policy in favor of management policy, so that we can have a, like, we will be consolidating the policy which is which defines this relation. Implementation wise, since the current implementation of managed reconciler requires implementing these 4 resources, which are observe, create, update, and delete. We believe it will be straightforward, and we will need very little changes on like per resource basis, and we could just implement the functionality in the managed reconciler side. Like if the policy is observe only, then instead of calling create, update, or delete, simply return in the reconciliation loop, so that we can make sure that we are just calling the observe method. Of course, we will introduce this with a feature gate. It could be something like enable alpha management policies. And I already mentioned the deprecation of deletion policy. There are some details on like some conflicting cases and how we are proposing to handle that. This part is actually important because in the original proposal issue, there were 2 possible options, and one was using the same PRD with some like annotation or flag or parameter, which is the thing that we are proposing here. And the main problem with that is actually this would mean using the same schema, and that will mean that we will still need to provide the required parameters to observe the resources. So this is actually a huge issue with the previous, like at that time of the proposal issue created. But now we have a, in Crossplane, in Kubernetes 1.25, there is a feature which is now graduated to beta, and it is being able to do some validations with common expression language. And this allows us to, instead of marking a field as required no matter what, we can now define more dynamic policies. And we can say that if the policy is observe only, then this field is optional. Otherwise, this field is required. So this allows us to solve that's like required fields problem. And I believe this will also help with the current way of importing resources, because the same problem also already was there. To import an existing resource, you need to provide all the required parameters. But the problem with this solution is, of course, it requires Kubernetes 1.25 to get the behavior or feature by default. And as you know, usually we don't have control, like users don't have control over API server flags. So I think it is fair to assume that people get this feature starting with Kubernetes 1.25. So this is also something that worth mentioning. Another relevant point with observe only is actually also in the original issue, we make some, we mentioned that like Terraform has data sources concept, and Crossplane needs something like that. And being able to like get data from existing resource is already covered with the proposal, but still Terraform data sources has another capability, which I believe we will also need very similar capabilities with Crossplane, is actually you can do some filtering and querying. So instead of just pointing like we are talking about this exact external resource, you could also do some like, okay, give me the most recent AMI, or give me the default VPC. Like this kind of querying and filtering is already available with Terraform, and I believe this is very relevant to this design, and also we will need to support that at some point. However, supporting this in the exact, like using the exact same way of how Terraform doing does not make sense with Crossplane, because we have a one-to-one mapping between the managed resource and the resource it controls. So when you do some querying and filtering, this is not guaranteed. Like based on the filters you have given, there could be more than one matching resource, there could be no matching resources, or the matching resource might change in time. So this is why we like choose to leave this as a future work, because there are some relevant work ongoing in composition functions, which could be leveraged to be leveraged as a potential solution. And in the document, I am giving two options, and the conclusion is for now we want to leave this open as a future work until we get composition functions feature landed and matured a bit. So in the meantime, we can get the policy implemented and we can get support for observe only resources, and hopefully we can tackle this querying and filtering at a later point. And as I mentioned, the other alternative was having dedicated CRDs similar to Terraform data sources. And I already mentioned that, like, this is not fitting how Crossplane is modeling managed resources. And this would mean introducing another type of resource other than managed resources, which is similar to what I propose here in option A. Yeah, so that's basically a quick summary of the proposal.
Yeah, nice, Hassan. Thanks for walking us through that. I'm going to open the floor for at least a couple minutes here on if folks have some questions or some, reactions or feedback that they want to share about what Hassan just walked us through.
I'll just mention that obviously, I thought about this, and it's a really hard problem to solve, and I really appreciate that you sort of created the sync channel, Hassan, and listened to a lot of people and synthesized a lot of the background context into this proposal. It definitely helps a lot while reviewing and weighing up the options. And it's definitely not I know that I've been on one side of the argument around whether there should be separate resources for observer-only resources or they should be the same, and it's definitely not black and white. So it's a challenging one. I'm glad that you're leading.
Cool.
Hassan, do you walk through in the details here? Do you walk through how a potential migration or upgrades, et cetera, happen over time to if you do go forward with removing deletion policy and replacing that by the superset management policy that also encompasses deletion policy? Do you walk through how exactly that migration would happen over time and impact to folks already running in production environments and stuff like that?
Yeah, maybe this section of deprecation of deletion policy might be relevant here. I try to list all possible combinations of deletion policy versus management policy, and try to answer should the resource observe, should the resource create, update, and delete. And obviously there are no issues with observe, create, or update, but there are some confusing or conflicting cases with delete and observe only, with deletion, I would say. For example, if deletion policy is delete and management policy is observe only, this indicates that according to deletion policy, we should delete the external resource, but according to management policy, we should only do the observe. So this is a conflicting case. And the proposal for conflicting cases is to not to delete, and this is both to err on the side of caution, not to like delete the resources while the intention is not that, but also if we say that like for conflicting cases we will do the non-default behavior, it's also it turns out to be also a no, which means like here the non-default policy is observe only, and we will not delete. And here the non-default policy is orphan, and we will not delete, etc. So I feel pretty good about the migration or deprecation of deletion policy, and I don't expect too much issues, but of course it's open for feedback, and I would appreciate if others put some thought and let me know if I'm missing something.
I already obviously discussed this with you, Hassan, and this is less of a concern about this proposal specifically and more a general observation that as we change things in these resources that we've marked V1 beta 1, we are accruing a couple of fields, like at least 3 now on every managed resource that are deprecated and that we don't have an immediate plan to actually remove, because removing a field would be a breaking change. So for instance, this is a really old one, but when we added provider config as a type, we actually used to have a type called provider for each provider. It was different from the package type provider. And it's actually still supported, and it exists there as a field, and we have to have logic in Crossplane so that if someone who's been using Crossplane for 100 years sets that field, we honor it. Similarly with secret stores being added, we deprecated, well, we probably will deprecate the right connection secret to ref field and introduce a new field there. And I think that new field, in my opinion, is much better. I like the design of the new API a lot more there. In this case, I like the I think I like the design more, but I don't love that there would still be a deletion policy there. With this new policy, we would have to figure out the relationship between the two of them, have a bunch of code to handle both of them. So I'm hesitant to add more blockers to this proposal, but I am starting to feel like I'd like to understand, what does it mean when we deprecate these things? When are they actually going to go away so that we don't have to support them anymore? I could imagine they're not going to go away until we delete the V1 beta 1 APIs effectively, I guess, or maybe get to a point where we say the field will exist so that you can submit a document that has it, but it doesn't do anything anymore. We don't actually honor its content or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't put enough thought on that, but do you think if like having a conversion webhook could be helpful here, like immediately dropping the deletion policy and then providing a conversion webhook so that we can get rid of the old policy or old fields sooner than later?
I don't know if I think a conversion webhook would require us to introduce a new version, right? So the conversion webhook would mean, if I understand correctly, that let's say a particular resource, when we add this new feature, is add V1 beta 1. I think that the reason a conversion webhook would be good would be we could introduce V1 beta 2 or V1 or something like that, and that could have a management policy. V1 beta 1 would not get a management policy. That feature would not be enabled there, and we would translate deletion policy into the management policy. That would I think be better, because then the newest version of the API would only have kind of our new way of thinking rather than having all the old deprecated baggage there. So yeah, that's perhaps something we could do.
Yeah.
I do personally want to, we can do this out of band. I personally want to noodle on this management policy field a little bit. At the moment, it's like the observe, create, update feels a little less intuitive to me than just like, what should I do when you delete this managed resource? Maybe it's because I'm too close to it. I've been using the old field for a long time, but
Cool. So yeah, so I think so yeah, Hassan, thanks very much for walking us through this and kind of getting us getting this topic warmed up for us. And so yeah, obviously there will be more feedback and discussion, and we'll follow up async on it. But yeah, thank you very much for introducing it to us today. And so yeah, feedback from everybody is certainly welcome on that pull request, and there's a link in the agenda doc directly to it. So I wanted to, if we're running out of time here, so I wanted to maybe see if we could quickly hop to Pete. Because I know Pete has a topic that he wanted to bring up, and there have been some previous discussion on it as well about moving the docs out of the core Crossplane repo. So Pete, do you want to quickly share your screen for that, or do you want me to have my screen up, or what works best for you?
I don't have anything to share. I'll just talk a little bit.
Start talking.
All right. So one of the things that's been kicked around is moving the docs. So background, just for the fullness of things, the way documentation is generated today is everything lives within the Crossplane repo, Crossplane. And then there are automations that then sync the docs folder from Crossplane to Crossplane/docs. That docs repository is what is actually posted on the web and hosted. So there's this multi-step process that happens. As a result, there's some we lose some things like the ability to look at deploy previews, which I mentioned in this issue. So you can't look at a rendered version. It requires contributors to have make installed to be able to build locally and test, which I'm not a fan of from a documentation standpoint. It sounds trivial to engineering, but it's a very scary thing for non-engineers. So what I'm thinking about doing is moving all the documentation so that its root source of truth is only one place, and that place is the docs repo. So all the docs live in one place. There'll be linkage in whatever form from Crossplane to that repository, so folks are aware of it. But it removes a lot of the machinery that's required today for that publishing process. Yeah, there was another point I was going to make, and I've already forgotten it, but open to questions and feedback.
Pete, did you have a sense of any major feedback or pushback that was given for this? Was like versioning, making sure that the docs are versioned along with like code releases smoothly? Was that something that was brought up and already addressed, or?
I don't think so. For that one, it's pretty easy because we're going to follow the existing pattern where today a branch maps to a folder. So the docs folder in branch release 1.9 maps to the folder 1.9 inside of the docs repository, right? So every branch ends up kind of combining down to the same place. That doesn't change. So every version of Crossplane that has documentation will have its folder in the docs repository, like it does today.
So when I create a PR, and like back to our previous discussion on environment config specific documentation, so we ask to include documentation together with the new feature, like we're adding a new patch type, we want documentation for this new functionality. So how it will look like after this change? Will it be parallel PR or something else?
So this is to Jared's point. I mean, the biggest concern that's been raised primarily by Nick has been that process changes. A PR would be opened against the docs repository for that documentation. And then it's up to y'all to determine how you want to link to that. Do you want to reference it in the issue? Do you want to reference it in the PR? Do you want to treat them as asynchronous things? I think that's up to the source maintainers. But the main thing is around getting visibility and really moving out of markdown based documentation review and moving towards rich rendered documentation review.
Yeah, I think
Can we keep a...
Oh, go ahead, Harry. You continue.
Yeah, thank you. Just like, can we keep like a developer side of documentation so it will be like closely bound to the PR and code functionality, and then like a extended version of it should go to like the separate repo? I'm concerned with like losing part of the documentation when we totally split the process.
I don't have any objections to that. You know, if there's a desire to do a syncing from Crossplane, you know, to the docs, or, you know, mirror it back, that's fine with me. To me, the big thing is the docs should be the
Yeah,
source of
just
truth.
because I don't want to go with the hundreds, doesn't look so.
Yeah.
Victor, I think, yeah. Yeah, so part of this is, you know, separating these out, not to make the lives of the developer harder, but to kind of create two fault domains, if you will, right? Because for me to make changes to documentation requires me making changes to the Crossplane repository. And, you know, I would like to not do that, you know, and reduce that risk there. So how you want to do that, I think, is up to the engineers.
Does a Git submodule make sense? Does it make sense to submodule the Crossplane repository under the docs repository so docs can reach in and grab anything it wants for a particular version, but the technical docs can stay closer to the Crossplane code?
I think the challenge with that is the current branching strategy. This is another thing that I wanted to solve, is because there is one docs folder in Crossplane and that docs folder is tied to a branch, it makes it much more complicated to do something like that, because there's no branching within the docs repo itself. And one of the things that I'm trying to solve for is fixing. It is a very common thing to find something that needs to be fixed in multiple versions. And it's a huge hassle to do. You know, the backporting, I don't feel confident in the backporting automation, and even just the process of opening, you know, multiple PRs or switching branches it's a hassle as a docs maintainer. And so I think the submodule thing might not work.
Yeah, so we're running out of time here. So that I think this conversation will have to, you know, continue. Like, so next steps, like, what are you looking for? Do you want some of this feedback to be added to this issue here? Is it like we keep that going? Is this the right forum for the feedback?
Yeah, I would say if you've got additional comments or concerns, please add them into the issue. If we need to have you know, I'm happy to jump on and talk in depth with some folks. You know, I know I've had a couple of those conversations already. Happy to talk some more. You know, I think there's a lot of data in that issue already, and happy to get some more.
Cool. Yeah, and I do like, you know, consolidating. My preference would be like, if we do move them, like, to do the wholesale. Don't like still keep some docs over there, because that doesn't address this at all. Then you're still kind of confused about, wait, where do I put docs? So I like the benefit of having it all in one place and not having, you know, because we see that error happen all the time if people go edit the docs. Like, no, you got to edit the other docs. And then like preview stuff is really actually nice functionality as well. So yeah, okay, so let's keep this conversation going in here and try to drive to a resolution of it. And thanks for driving this still, Pete. Really appreciate that, man.
Thanks, Jared.
Okay, so yeah, so we're out of time here. So let's maybe dive into this one a little bit further next time. But I did want to put out a call to people of, you know, we're trying to, there's some thinking going around about how can we improve the overall experience, like developing and building platforms, you know, and like all sorts of issues that people run into with, you know, silent errors or, you know, challenging, you know, authoring compositions, whatever it is. So there's definitely some, you know, like when I do some crowdsourcing around that, to see like what are issues that you guys are running into with building your own platforms, and we can maybe kind of put that into a single effort where we squash a lot of those bugs out. So that's definitely open for people to comment on as well. And then with that, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. So quick note that next week, next time is canceled for the holidays. So we won't see each other in this forum until early January, but we'll be online in asynchronous conversations over Slack, and hope everyone has a great, wonderful holiday season, and good to see everybody today. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Yeah, bye.